Hi guys, welcome to the podcast. It's great having you both.
Great.
We have a really great topic today. We want to talk about measuring impact. How important is it to measure impact in your organisation as an entrepreneur? Is it really important? Do you need to spend time doing that? What do you think?
Well, I think first of all, if you don't measure impact, you're living in a fantasy world. I think, you live on feelings, I feel it's great. You tell everybody all the things we're doing, but actually we're talking about measuring impact,
Yeah.
making a difference. And so you do need mechanisms that actually tell you the truth when sometimes you might not want to hear the truth.
Yeah.
And so again, as a leader, you've got to be determined and committed to knowing the truth so that you can build on a solid foundation for the next level. So mechanisms of, obviously questionnaires, feedback, inviting people into your organization to give you honest feedback are all really important to know the truth. If you don't know the truth, you're building on a dodgy foundation. And I know a lot of people, leaders that go, oh, I've got the best organization in the world. And I go, how do you know that? I'll say, we're doing the greatest thing. How do you know that?
Yeah.
And I think you can't know that by your own feelings, even by your own staff, because we all want to feel good.
Yep.
And feel good is important, but it's not the measure that you know whether you make an impact or not.
Yeah. Also, you're going to have people that come to you at various different times and say, well, tell me how many people you're reaching. Tell me about your budget and what your turnover is going to be and what your end of year profit's going to look like. Tell me about how many people have come to know Jesus through what you're doing. So, if you're a charity and you're applying for grants, you've got to know your stats, you've got to know your figures, you've got to know where you're up to with things. You can't just pick these numbers out of the sky and hope that that'll be okay, because it's not okay. So it's really important to measure impact and know where you're up to with things.
The thing with entrepreneurs is that we're very fast paced, aren't we? We're always on to the next thing. So it could be an easy thing to forget the detail. What do you think?
Well, I think there's a big difference between a visionary and a vision builder. Let me just say that to people that are listening today. There's many visionaries out there, but visionaries don't build a lot. They dream a lot.
Right.
Vision builders get a dream and then put a strategy in to build. And what we're talking about today, measurables and knowing how to measure your success, is so vital to know that I am actually building something, not just having a great time with a vision.
Yeah.
And I think one of my examples is, I'm the CEO of Grace Foundation, which is a school-based charity where we send workers into, and some are resident within schools, where we're helping to change the culture. We go to hard to reach schools, we go to failing schools, and we put Christian workers in there that, family workers, youth workers, and ethos lead. And what they do is really trying to help change the culture to a positive culture, trying to engage with families, the community, and helping the school build the bridges into their students so they're more equipped to learn, they want to learn, and also that parents are cheering them on as well, whatever their situation. So that's all wonderful. That's all nice and feeling. But we have created what we call a QA mechanism, quality assurance mechanism, that measures all those things. And we measure from parents, from teachers, from students. We do different things from surveys to feedback. And when Ofsted comes in, we can give them that information that says, we're not just doing a good job. Have a look at this.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing is, over years, how we've kind of developed that system. Just in the last 2-3 years, we now get outstanding for student development in all that we do.
Brilliant.
Now, we don't get that because we feel good or we work hard. We do that because we've got evidence of impact.
Yeah.
And so I know the impact we're having now. I don't just feel we're having good impact. And I think there's a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. We did a progress survey a couple of years ago with the Lions programme. I think it was the first one that we'd ever done, because we got to that stage where it had been running for so many years. And actually, we wanted to know exactly what impact we were having with the people that came on the Lions programme. And it was fascinating, absolutely fascinating, to be able to know how many projects are still in operation, where people are up to, the impact that those projects are having on people and communities and, whatever field they're involved in, what people thought about the Lions process, and even, 10 years on from doing the Lions programme, the impact that it still carries in their life. And to be able to have that information and formulate it in a way that actually helps us to look at where we're at, kind of what's working, what's maybe not working so well, what can we do differently to enhance it, what can we change, what can we tweak, what do we need to keep the same. It aided our our move forwards in a really positive way.
I think also when you're running a program, there's a statement in what does good look like? And I think it's really important as a leader, first of all, what good looks like, because otherwise you can deceive yourself and go, we're doing a great job. Everyone's doing fantastic.
Yeah.
But what have we established in our minds to the vision, what good looks like? Now, good isn't the destination, but it's a great marker. And so we want to measure everything about what we've agreed good looks like and then move it forward.
Yeah.
And I think, you've got to always be committed to life learning. You've got to be committed that I have not arrived. I'm on the journey as a leader and as an organisation. And, even now we get outstanding obviously from Ofsted. That's a great achievement.
Yeah.
As being an organisation coming in and working with the schools. And the schools, we've got schools queuing up for us actually because we're making this impact, but we know we are.
Yeah.
And I think, many years ago, when I first took on academies, I actually led a multi-academy trust. And one particular school, I just couldn't break. It's like everything I tried was failing. And I got through a few heads and all the rest. I was, their leader, their boss. And one day, I spoke with a top educationist and I said, this one school, I'm just not cracking it. I'm working harder and harder. And they gave me actually a name of somebody. They said, this person will come in, identify, but she'll be really tough, education specialist. So I rang her up and she said, I'm too busy. I persuaded her to come. She told me the price, which broke my bank. But anyway, but she came in and, within a day, I had a coffee at the end of the day. She told me exactly what was wrong and what the barriers were to growth,
Right.
what the obstructions were. So I was working harder without really knowing what the barriers and obstructions were. And she gave me 3 simple things. And it was like, she says, you tackle them, this school will work. And, I thought that sounds too simple.
Yeah.
I've just paid her a lot of money for simple talk. But, we spent more time together, obviously. And she worked with me as I changed those 3 things. And that school went from needing improvement to good with outstanding features.
Wow.
Now, it took 3 years, but I think I still would be there today if I hadn't invited someone in with fresh eyes to say.
Really
So
good.
it wasn't my failure, it was fresh eyes.
Yeah.
She told me what I suddenly thought, yeah, I know that. But she emphasised it, this is your obstacles. And I think every organisation has obstacles. If we don't have evaluation and measurements, we're not ever going to see what the obstacles, which is stopping us grow.
Yeah.
So we have to remember, every organisation has things that stop them grow. It's not they're always doing the wrong thing. They need to maybe emphasise something. And fresh eyes help me do that.
Definitely. And sometimes there's outside factors, isn't there, that impact how we measure what we're doing. So what kind of outside factors would kind of impact that?
Well, the outside factors are sometimes economics. There can be a change. And as we know in our nation, there's been so many changes in economics over the last decade, from COVID through to recession, through to all sorts of things that, definitely challenge us, especially as charities and as small businesses.
Yeah.
And, tax situations. So we've got to understand that economics, just recently a budget,
Yeah.
and suddenly change. And, it knocks the wind out your sails sometimes. And so there's things that I'm not in control of that happen. And there's things I'm in control of. And some of those external things, that you talk about, economics, also, employment. When there's unemployment, sometimes recruitment's easier. When, there's a lot of employment, getting the right person. I think one of the greatest challenges to every organisation is it's not finding staff, it's getting the right staff.
Yeah.
And especially in Christian ministries, because you want a Christian, you want their chemistry to match your chemistry spiritually, emotionally, and also skill-wise. And that's very difficult. So sometimes, it can be economics, it can be recruitment, getting the right people.
Sorry.
No, I am fine. I am so used to everybody, Shell, butting in. So, Shell, you may have something better to say. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say personal circumstances. So somebody in the team or, you as a leader can have something happen that's unexpected that all of a sudden creates, a bit of a crisis almost. And, you have to be able to deal with that.
Well, we had that this year, didn't we? Because, I suddenly had cancer. And, that kind of threw a curveball to me. Took me out of the game for a while. And, it kind of like, I guess it shook the team a little bit as well, personally and organisationally. And we needed to get through that, not stop the momentum. And I guess in some ways it started to say, well, if I'm not around, have we got everything in place to be able to still move forward.
Yeah.
I don't mean, just death. I'm on about, just taking out the game, and that can happen. Personal circumstances, health. So these are some of the external things that can definitely shake an organisation that you have to work through and even plan for, even though it might sound, not brilliant.
Yeah. How important is it to focus on this? Like, how much time do you dedicate? Is it important just to evaluate it, get your responses in, look at all the external and internal factors, and then move on to the next thing? Or is it really important to really take a detailed approach?
I think you don't spend loads of time on it, but you do spend some time on it. You've got to know where you're at. You've got to know where you're at to be able to move forward. But I think if you get too sucked into things, it can distract you and shift your focus in not a great way. It's something that I actually struggle with. Like I am a big picture person, but I can get lost in the details sometimes as well. And I think it's learning to know what details are important and what doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's really important, the time you give that. I mean, some
Yeah.
people don't give it enough time. Some people give it too much time. Too much analysis brings paralysis
Yep.
of an
Nice.
organisation.
Good.
Yeah.
Did you just think of that?
I'm on a podcast at the moment. And I just think that it's really measuring that we can be honest with ourselves and the organisation so we can move forward. But again, whether it's our personality or it's of leader or it's the culture of the organisation, we've got to make sure that we're not too over much. Recently, we had some feedback forms on something, and, there was obviously a concern and there was a challenge on something. We could have got, okay, yeah, we know that, ta-ra. But actually, we looked at it and thought, well, what response does this need that's fair, that actually shows that we are listening? So people who filled in a form, it wasn't just ta-ra. And I think we responded measurably and in the right way, but we gave that some thought.
Yeah.
Because, when it involves people especially, you've got to give that some thought. So I think it's trying to get the right measure, not too much. And, Shell said, Shell's far more analytical than I am, really, but I am interested in detail. You've got to be,
Yeah.
when you're a leader. But it's like how much time you give that. And that's a challenge for us all, to have a little bit of self-examination. Or again, outside coming in, saying, how am I doing leading? Ask my staff how I'm doing leading. That's fine.
Yeah.
And, what emphasis is good and what emphasis might not be so good.
Yeah. I mean, I do have to confess, I love a good debrief. Like I do. I just love the opportunity to be able to sit down and say, what can we do better? How can we change this? How can we tweak this? What's worked really well? What's been a challenge? All those kinds of questions. And I do think that questions are really important in how you move forward. Asking the right questions is really, really important, because you can get bogged down with the wrong questions. And so almost asking yourself the question, are we asking the right questions, is really helpful.
I think internally, if you move just to internally for a second, giving permission to your staff to ask questions about the organisation, the leadership, the effects of what it's having, even on staff welfare, anything like that. I mean, as an organisation for ITD, we've had a real stretch year this year.
Yeah.
We've brought in new staff, we've brought in lots of new vision, and it's been very exciting but very tiring. And so then, you go, as a leader, you go, you know what, we can't stretch as much next year.
Yeah.
We've got to establish what we've launched, and also allow people to grow in capacity to run and lead what they've been asked to lead. We're a little bit more easier. And so we all love stretch. I know Shell and myself actually get excited and I guess fueled by vision. Yeah. But again, a vision builder understands that they've got to establish it, not just launch it.
Yeah.
And I think, for me in 2025, we've really got to establish, but that's personally as well as an organisation. So we build on solid foundation. And that's an assessment. But I think building a culture where your staff feel that they can ask any question or they can make any comment. And we definitely try to do that within ITD. If there's a problem between staff, I'm a great believer in nipping at the bud. Don't let it stew. And even though that may be difficult, it's much better to do it early on in the process than something just stew and minds start working. So, staff unity, staff welfare is really important to me. And so allowing that sort of culture is really important as well. We're not just a driving vision culture, we're a building culture, releasing people, but people that can burn on, not burn out.
And I guess it's really important to establish your objectives and do your benchmarking before you even start a project. Because if people know what standard they need to achieve, then you can evaluate it better when you've done the project.
Well, I think something recent, I'm not going to mention names, but, I had one of my team, decide that they'd got a great idea for vision and spent quite a bit of time on it, actually, detailed time, working how they work. And then it came to a point where it was like, well, I haven't said this is the vision we're going to do, or it hadn't been communicated to people that it really mattered to, that we could either have input or we could say timing and everything like that. And that took a bit of a tough conversation, if I'm honest, because this
Right.
person had put a lot of heart into something.
Yeah.
They believed in it, but they hadn't done the right process of communication.
Right.
And so, it took myself and actually Shell as well, to sit down with this person and just go, you know what? I mean, I was quite straight. I said, we don't silo work in this organization. This has been a bit of silo work. So the person said, what does that mean? So I was able to explain what I saw silo working as. We're a team. There's processes we have so that we can burn on and not burn out. We're not made for individuals to shoot off in different directions. We place every bit of vision in a particular area. And you know what? Because we approached it in such a way, nipped it at the bud, it was a great conversation that built more into the team. But if I'd have let that go,
Yeah.
then it could have gone off in a direction that wouldn't have made other staff pleased. And then could have even opened a door of license that, well, if they did that, I can do that. That's fine then. And that's not the culture we operate in ITD. So you've got to guard the culture.
Yeah.
And in the measurable there, it's like I'm measuring the amount of work this person has. I'm also measuring where they're working. And actually, if I want to be blunt, am I paying them to do that?
Yeah.
Or am I paying them to do something else that we really need doing right now, that person's skilled at, rather than go off in their own direction? But I'm not going to also deny, because I complimented that person in what they'd done. I complimented the idea, but I said, not now. Let's revisit this. And that person was fine. So you don't shoot people down, but you do have to approach things. And I think that's measuring people's workload. That's measuring people's decision making. So it is internal as well as asking someone coming to say, what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong.
Yeah.
I think you have to measure yourself as well as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a pioneer. You have to have moments where you measure, where am I up to? How am I doing? Kind of what is my state of mind, or what other people think of me or see me as. How is that shaping things? How is that having an impact? And I think if every team member in the team had that moment where they said, what am I bringing to the table here? Is what I'm bringing good? Is what I'm bringing needing changing? Do I need to change my approach to certain things or to the way I interact with certain people? I think if we spent a bit more time doing that as well, that would have a massive impact on the way we operate as an organisation.
Yeah.
I've had a time recently where I just knew I'd kind of got to a place where I needed to go away on my own for a while and just process some stuff. And a lot of that, it came from a place of self-awareness. It came from a place of just thinking, actually, I'm not operating in the way that I could operate here. So I need to just kind of take a bit of time out for me to look at where I'm at and how I'm doing and all those kinds of things. And so I think it's important that as leaders and entrepreneurs and pioneers that we have those moments where we're not just measuring the impact of what we're doing, but we're also measuring the impact of who we are and how that's affecting the people around us.
Yeah.
Every leader needs to sail a boat, and every leader needs to know where port and harbour is.
Right.
And, what Shell's saying there is, sometimes our awareness as leaders is we just keep going.
Yeah.
We're breakthrough people. We just keep going. When others stop, we've got to keep going.
Yeah.
But actually, more than that, we're human beings with emotions, spirit,
Yeah.
physical needs. And I think, the thing is, a leader in measuring themselves, self-awareness, and allowing others to speak in as well, needs to sometimes say you need to go to harbour.
It is hard though, isn't it? Because when you're on this journey, sometimes you just feel like you're by yourself.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the big challenge, isn't it? In one way, it's lonely,
Yeah.
and you've got to go places that other people don't go. But on other things, you've also got to go, you know what? I've been sailing a long time and I'm getting weary.
Yeah.
Now, tiredness and weary are two different things.
Yeah.
Tiredness, I can have a short break, I'm fine. I can go to sleep early. But weariness is more dangerous.
Yeah.
And when our spirit gets weary or our mind and our heart gets weary, we start to make decisions that we wouldn't usually make. We start to become shorter with people. We start to react rather than respond.
Yeah.
And I think, for me, I have to have that self-awareness, go, Gary, it's time to go to harbour.
Right.
And I think that is a very legitimate place for everyone to go. And I think the sooner a leader learns that in measuring for themselves, I think the longer you'll run.
Yeah. That's a great point.
Absolutely. I had quite a personal, I guess, encounter with God a number of years ago where I was just struggling to be who God had created me to be. And I was like, what's going on here, God? And I remember God gave me this picture and I was steering this massive wooden ship, like a kind of old school sort of, battleship almost.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely blowing a gale. There were storms everywhere. I was in the middle of the sea. It was going all over the place. There was water and waves coming onto the boat. And I'm there holding this steering wheel thinking, come on, Shell, come on. And I remember in this picture that God gave me, like Jesus was stood behind me going, I can steer the ship, Shell. I can steer that. I was like, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. We're keeping on. And in the end, I just had this real sense of God saying to me, Shell, just go below deck. Just let me steer the ship. Just go below deck. And I remember in this vision, God speaks to me in visions. It's just the way he does. And I went below deck and there was no windows. I couldn't see where I was going, but it felt so safe and so warm and so inviting that I was just like, I just need to be here for a while. And it was actually, it was probably a couple of years that I felt like I had this below deck experience with God, where he just took me on a journey where it kind of felt like I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was safe.
Right.
And I knew I was okay. And then I remember distinctly the moment where God said to me, come on, Shell, come and see where we are.
Yeah.
And it was just this, it was like there was a new horizon. It was like an opportunity to just focus on me for a while and focus on the things that made me who I was. And from that place, I was then able to kind of go back on the main deck and lead differently and live differently and love differently and hear God differently. And it changed me as a person.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that, God does that kind of for years at a time, or, sometimes it can just be a day. Sometimes it's just like, come on, Shell, come below deck for a while. And you're like, all right, I know that's a safe place to be. And I know that I'll be okay. And I think God knows us. God knows exactly what we need. The problem is that sometimes we ignore God and we don't listen to what it is that he's saying to us. Or we don't listen to the way that we're leading, or we don't listen to what the people around us are saying. And we just think, no, I've got to keep going. I'm a pioneer. I've got to keep going. But you can't keep going from a place of emptiness.
Yeah.
You can't keep going from a place where you've got nothing to give. As a leader, you are giving out all the time to people, to vision, to decisions, to choices. And you've got to be able to give from a place of feeling full. Not a place of emptiness.
I think the challenge is I'm indispensable, What a lie.
Yeah.
But that's even what we say in our subconscious. If I'm not there, it won't happen. And the point is some truth in that. But we've actually got to get to a place where we're not indispensable. And because if I keep thinking I'm indispensable, I never take a break. Even if I have a break, my mind doesn't rest. I'll still do emails when I'm on holiday and, all those things. I don't play, I just work. And I think, the challenge for anyone in leadership, again, in that measure, if we don't measure ourselves well, we're not going to measure our organisation or others well.
Yeah.
And I think people look for an example, not just in leadership, but in life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I do like playing, as you know. I do like going to play sport and having a laugh. But it's like when I'm not laughing or I'm not playing, I've got a problem. That's me.
Right.
I know that. People close to me will go, what's your problem?
Mm.
You're not laughing. You're not playing like you used to. And I'm thinking, no, I'm thinking again, I'm indispensable. And so I've got to work harder. I've got to, be around more. Even when no one's seeing me, I've got to work. And it's a driver that kills people.
Yeah.
It really does. The strongest it will kill. And so, again, people listening today need to understand you're not indispensable. And sometimes handing things over while you just have a break is the best thing you can do to prove that. And also, if God's got me, he's got what I do. Otherwise, I'm doing something for me.
Yeah.
And it's a very honest talk to ourselves. And I think that measuring is really important if we want to run a marathon. I'm a little older than Shell, not a lot, as you can tell. But in that age difference, it's not that I've learned more. It's like I have learned that I know my limits.
Right.
And knowing your limits is really important.
Yeah.
But it takes ages to learn that, or to be honest with yourself. And I'd encourage people, when you're talking about measurables and for impact in organisations, never forget yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you go, or you kind of burn out, whatever it is, it can bring devastation to that organisation. So it's really important that we're honest with ourselves and we let people speak into us as well. You need a holiday. Yeah, tell me again. But, that sort of thing.
That's really interesting. Thank you guys for just opening up and being real about that, because these are the kind of topics that entrepreneurs don't hear about, and we just keep going and going and going. But the reality is it's a journey, and we do have to measure ourselves and the impacts that we are having on ourselves. Finally then, Shell, you are the leader of the Lions, and I know that in the Lions you have this kind of apprentice style challenge where you give people some seed funding and you give them a little challenge, and they have to go away and accomplish the challenge, and then they have to come and review it and see how they got on. How important is that challenge in the whole course, and how important is that as part of the program?
Yeah, it's a great challenge, actually. And the thing I always say about that challenge is that if you can't do it for another organisation, how are you going to expect other people to do it for your organisation?
Right.
I don't want to say too much,
because
I don't want to give the challenge away for those people who do come onto the Lions programme. But, a big part of that is that you do the challenge and then you come back and everybody kind of talks about their journeys of what they've done on that challenge. And I think that's the point where those leaders grow the most.
Yeah.
Because, you see creativity, you see different ways that people have tackled the challenge, you see different outcomes of the challenge. And again, it's that point of debrief, it's that point of evaluation, it's that point of, I could have done that, or I could have thought differently in that way, or I could have done this. And so, we really do try to build in the things that we're talking about to different parts of the Lions programme, because we want to practice what we're talking about.
And it's a great challenge for entrepreneurs to do, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
a great
it always
they hate it.
They hate
It's a great
it.
challenge. It's an honest challenge.
Yeah.
And it often comes at a really inconvenient moment.
Yeah.
So, we often have people saying, oh, no, I can't do that. My diary's full for the next, however many weeks or months. And you think, no, these are real life things that come up. As an entrepreneur, you can't just plan your journey out and be like, oh, yeah, this is how it's going to be and this is how it's going to roll, because those unexpected curveballs come in and you think, actually, I've got to deal with this now.
Yeah.
And that's one of the challenges that we put in front of people.
Yeah,
is, no, you're
amazing.
not going to have kind of 6 months to do this. This is something that you need to do now.
Yeah.
Someone once said, the greatest obstacle to vision is life. And I think there's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah.
As Shell was just saying there, curveballs in life, they can distract us. And I've said before, if we really take on board the distraction, it becomes a diversion.
Yeah.
And so distractions will always be there, but we've got to keep focused, evaluate, count the cost, and make sure we're looking in the mirror at ourselves too.
Amazing. I think you've rounded up very nicely there, Gary Spicer.
Thank you, Gemma.
Well, we've come to the end already, but thank you guys. It's been a really great one, a really honest one. So thank you for sharing. And thank you for joining us today. I hope that this has inspired you on your journey, your entrepreneurial journey, and know that you're not alone, and the Lions are here to support you, energize you, and give you that practical help that you need. We'll see you on the next one. See you soon.